All the etiquette you'd expect of a French nobleman from the period. A gentle British head nod. Those cannonballs are nasty. Arrow to the face. Nasty. You can imagine the conversation going on like this. Best soundtrack ever. Hey, I'm Dan Snow. I'm a historian at History Hit, and today I'm going to be reviewing battle scenes in movies set in the age of revolutions. The Patriot. Looking out the window, what have we got? Right, we've got a classic battlefield. All cinematographers do this. There was so much smoke coming out of exploding shells. Cannonballs didn't blow up in those days. There would have been plenty of smoke from the cannon, from the smoke coming out the muzzle of the cannon, but not in the middle of the battlefield like that. Two colours, two flags for each regiment. King's colour and regimental colour. If you lose those in battle, you're in big trouble. Now the Americans are they're going to fire a volley too early. The British too far away. These guns probably effective range 50 yards or so. They're going to fire too early. Yeah, you see. And then once you fire early, you lose the advantage. Because you'll reload, it takes, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds to reload. In which time the British are going to close and they're going to fire a big volley.
That Gates is a damn fool.
That's correct. Horatio Gates is a damn fool. He was very lucky to win the Battle of Saratoga, one of the great turning points of the war, and he got found out here big time. I wonder if the entire line would have fired at the same time. Usually I think you do platoon firing, so there's a constant fire going up the line like that. Those cannonballs are nasty. Yeah, the bouncing ball, that's great. You skim them off the ground, especially when the ground's hard, which it would have been in Camden. You can skim it and you can ensure that it's going to crash straight through the files of American troops. And there you go, they're running. Here come the British cavalry with Tarleton in the lead. I mean, I know the Battle of Camden was over quickly, but I'm not sure it's quite that quick.
These rustics are so inept.
Is that Cornwallis? He's only 42 in this battle. He's like an old man. I'm 42. There's Mel Gibson. He's getting his Daniel Day-Lewis on. He's been watching too much Last of the Mohicans, this fella. I mean, it is true. Irregular forces could move cross-country. They knew the landscape. They could move. They could get off the roads. I'm not sure how many took their young kids into battle like this.
Boys, listen to me. I'll fire first. I want you two to start with the officers and work your way down.
Aim for the officers. That was some riflemen, some skirmishers believed you should aim for the officers. Remove command and control from enemy units. Some just like to plug away at the privates, the people actually doing the fighting. But it's true, if you decapitate a unit, you remove the captain, lieutenant, the majors. That could destroy a unit's cohesion. Oh, looking at that uniform, two epaulets and a gorget, that steel thing hanging around his neck. I say he's the major. He's probably in command. Not anymore, he's not. Now they're going to be shooting back their brown besses. They're pretty inaccurate weapons. They're not ideal for this kind of fighting. They're volley weapons against a massed enemy, not against a couple of kids and a guy, an angry dad.
To the right!
The big issue they've got here, and this is the big problem with all these films, is it was just really slow to reload.
With your fingers up here. That's it, using it like a little paper funnel. So thumb to get it started and push it down. Now we want you to use finger and thumb on this as much as you can for safety.
And so to make the action exciting and sustainable, you've got to just be able to shoot quicker than they were able to back in the 18th century. I mean, you know, it's exciting. The Americans during the Revolutionary War, there was a kind of tension there. They tried to take the British on in conventional battles where you'd stand toe-to-toe. They tried to drill their troops to fight like Europeans did on European battlefields. But they also had this very impressive, irregular wing, where they would be able to move rapidly over the landscape. They could do things like seize Fort Ticonderoga off the British, or they could move to attack Quebec in Canada by taking advantage of their bushcraft, almost their guerrilla warfare skills. So what you get here is you get the Battle of Camden when they try and fight the British on level terms. It goes really badly. But you also see an ambush scene, which I think is slightly overblown, but it does give you a sense of the advantage that the Americans enjoy using rifles, using their skills as marksmen, and preying on isolated British detachments, which did happen all the time. The Patriot, I like the Camden battle scene. It showed the two lines getting close and exchanging musket volleys. The ambush scene was kind of fantasy, so maybe I'll give it 6 out of 10. The Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl.
Well, she has had a very trying day. Ghastly weather, don't you think?
Bleak, very bleak.
What's that?
So this is Port Royal in Jamaica, one of the key strongholds of the Royal Navy in the Caribbean in the 18th century. It was very well fortified. I'm not so sure a small pirate ship like the Black Pearl would take it on.
I've heard stories. She's been preying on ships and settlements for near 10 years. Never leaves any survivors.
No survivors.
I mean, the Black Pearl apparently has got 32 12-pound cannons, firing a 12-pound cannonball, firing away, and HMS Victory had like 30 32-pound guns on one deck, and it probably still wouldn't attack a shore fortification like this. It's the old classic, exploding cannonballs again. These cannonballs would have been solid, they'd have been firing solid shot, they wouldn't have exploded on impact like this. I don't know if the Black Pearl will be able to man both sides, guns on both port and starboard side, and launch an amphibious assault on the shore as well. She would not have had enough crew to do that. Right, the British are responding now. There you go. I don't think they had mortars on board. They haven't got indirect fire. Those cannon would have been able to fire on a flat trajectory, not over and into the courtyard. I think the artillerymen should be wearing blue jackets as well. But you know what? I'm not a stickler. That's fine. Go with it. Pirates, really like the Vikings before them, want to attack where the enemy is weakest. You want to prey on people, ambush. You do not want to attack where the enemy is strongest. The heart of British power in the Caribbean, Port Royal. That would be crazy. It's expensive and difficult to repair your ship if there's battle damage. You don't want to lose casualties. It's tough recruiting people. And so as a result, this scene is pretty unrealistic. The pirates were much more likely to have sailed along the coast, look for settlements that were undefended, pounce on ships that might be carrying valuable cargoes and weren't very well protected, and then make their money there. Port Royal's got an interesting history itself because it begins like a nest of pirates, basically a load of freebooters. The Royal Navy move in there and kind of make everything official, and as a result it became a place where anti-piracy patrols would go out, and pirates would end up imprisoned there, most of them executed. Pirates of the Caribbean, great fun, not super accurate. It's getting a 3. The Revenant.
Jim, you go get the captain.
This attack is one of the most extraordinary scenes in history. This group of fur trappers heading up country towards the Rockies to hunt for beaver. Beaver skin was one of the kind of miracle goods of the 19th century. Everyone wanted them for hats and to keep warm. And this group of 50 men were heading up the Missouri River towards South Dakota, towards the Rockies. So Leonardo DiCaprio is playing a character based on a historical figure we think is called Hugh Glass. There are a few accounts of his life. Many of them are probably wound up with mythologizing and folklore, but it seems that he was abducted by pirates. He had to serve on a pirate ship. He swam ashore. He then had various adventures on the frontier, including one very near-death experience with Native Americans, indigenous people, which saw his mate killed in front of him.
Get to the boat! To the boat, sir! Move! Move, move! Raise the fires!
So you leave the Furs. I mean, the Furs are the reason they're there. That's where they're going to get their money. That means that, you know, they're desperate. They're trying to escape by river. There are no roads. Wagons wouldn't work in that kind of terrain. So if you want to carry lots of big, bulky objects, you've got to go by boat. Arrow to the face. Nasty. It's amazing how much of this is shot in one take. Yeah, you sympathise with everyone in that scene. There's no kind of goodies and baddies. There was a lot of interaction between indigenous peoples and European frontiersmen settlers at this point. Some of it was peaceful, some of it was violent, and it was a very, very mixed picture. There was the Arikara tribe the day before, Glass actually, there's a negotiation that takes place and they promise to sell them some horses. The following day, there's a skirmish and many are killed and wounded. And I think that does sum up the kind of difficult, festering relationships that you'd had on the frontier as these new people are moving in and the inhabitants of those areas are very unwilling to see their grip loosened on those new territories. I think there's no good guys, no bad guys. I think in the kind of swirling, fairly lawless atmosphere of the frontier between indigenous societies and these European settlers pushing west, I think it would have been a terrible place. The Revenant, what a powerful scene that is. I'd give that scene 9 out of 10. Master and Commander.
Pass them high so they can see them, lads.
Hello, Doctor. Jack? Care for a cigar?
So there's Captain Aubrey steering himself. Which I think would have happened. Sailors, officers in the Georgian Navy, that's not what they're on about. You know, you could buy your rank in the army, but you couldn't buy your rank at sea. You had to know exactly what you were doing. You had to be expert. Jack Aubrey's based on a character called Thomas Cochrane, a true life, sort of very dashing naval officer from this period. And he disguises his ship as an American ship and manages to overwhelm a much bigger Spanish frigate early in the 19th century. I like the fact there's a lot of people on these ships. These ships would have felt extremely busy to us. People absolutely packed in. His bow chasers are firing. I love the bow chaser. On a ship of war in this period, nearly all the artillery, all the cannon face to the side, so you have to fire in the 90 degrees to your course. But there are a couple of cannon right up the front, capable of firing forward. Yeah, I love that. Young midshipmen. There were children on these ships. Many, many children.
No chance, but you have had warning. Stop now, or we will destroy your ship. English whaler, this is your last warning. Stop now, or we will destroy you.
Let's fly!
And often the bigger ship, the guns would fire over the decks of the smaller ship, which is what happens when Cochrane plays this trick. British tactics always very much get as close as you can to the enemy and just pump cannonballs straight into the hull. Kill and disable as many of the gun crews as you can. And very quickly, the whole battlefield obscured by smoke. I think that's very accurate. There would have been so much smoke, it would have been tough to see. There you go, mast going down. Once you lose the rigging, that's taking out the engine, it's taking out what is driving your ship along. In fact, even more than that, it's then providing a great big drag on you as that mast and rigging and sails is floating in the water behind you. You have to cut it away as quickly as you can. Oh, he's raked him. Well, that's the worst thing that can possibly happen at sea. You take your ship around the stern of an enemy, the back of an enemy where they've got very limited armament and very little protection, and you fire your cannons along the length of the ship, killing and disabling dozens and dozens of people. There would have been so-called frigate actions like this fairly regularly through the 18th and 19th century. In 1812, there's a famous case when the USS Constitution defeats the British ship Guerriere. They manoeuvre around each other, they blast each other with broadsides, masts and rigging goes overside, they attempt to board each other. So yeah, these actions were not unusual and could be fought to the bitter end. Nelson, the Battle of Cape St Vincent, a couple of broadsides, then straight in alongside, fight it out with cold steel on the quarterdeck. Gives you a great sense. This Marines there were red-coated soldiers, really, sea soldiers on all these ships, are small detachments, they're red-coated Marines. But the rest of them are just sailors, armed with whatever comes to hand. Well, that guy was using his ramrod for his cannon, I think. Oh, there he is, firing at close range with one of the deck-mounted guns. The Battle of Trafalgar, that played absolute havoc with one of the French ships, Redoutable, killed and wounded over 100 people with one discharge. This was one thing that actually they did at the Battle of Trafalgar. They would elevate the guns so much that you'd try and shoot down through the enemy hold to create great tearing wounds beneath the waterline and eventually sink enemy ships. But if they're trying to capture the enemy ship as a prize, you probably wouldn't do that. So they're trying to have their cake and eat it a little bit in this scene. You can hear the people shouting. I think in a battle with cannons firing, it would have been just so deafening. The noise of the guns would have been so deafening. Aubrey's chosen to board the French ship at this point. Now that could be something you do because you're outgunned by the enemy ship. You get in there, you deliver a few punches, then you close the range and you try and fight it out, relying on your motivated, aggressive crew to carry the day. It's also something you do if you want to actually capture the enemy ship and take it home, because remember at this point, you don't get that much money for sinking a ship, but you get plenty of prize money split between the admiral, the captain and the crew for taking an enemy prize back to a friendly port. I've never seen a better depiction of fighting at sea. I think we don't know exactly what happened because we weren't there. It's hard to talk about accuracy, but I think they've gone through the sources, they've looked at technology that was available, and they've come up with a pretty convincing portrayal of what it would have been like. Such attention to detail there. Love that. 9 out of 10. This is Last of the Mohicans. True historical event. The bottom of Lake George, British outpost, French advancing down from Canada, besieging British garrisons. In the film, no one knows the siege is actually taking place, which I think isn't actually the case in real life, but it's good drama. Oh, I love this bit. I love the kind of reflection of the gunfire of the muzzle flashes off the water. Right, here we go. Big French siege guns. They suppress the British cannon on the walls and they dig those trenches closer and closer and closer until you can guarantee that you're going to form a breach in the wall. Smash a great hole in the wall. People talk about the trench of the First World War, but there's been trench warfare for a long time, and the sieges of the 18th century would have had plenty of trenches in them. They are digging a trench, actually digging a sap, digging it forward towards the British walls, so that you can bring the guns ever closer and they can have even more impact at super close range. The Brits trying to disrupt that process by firing at the French sappers, French engineers. They've got themselves protected, haven't they? You've got these canoes, these amazing shallow draft birch bark canoes that have been capable of carrying quite large loads, and not taking up much, not needing much water underneath them. And that's how supplies and people would have moved between these forts. Best soundtrack ever. They're the Highlanders and their kilts. Highlanders allowed to wear kilts in the 7 Years' War. They hadn't been allowed to do that since the Battle of Culloden, a generation, well, I think just over 10 years before. And now if they agreed to serve His Majesty, they could wear their Highland garb. So many signed up. Okay, now they're deploying their mortars. Interesting. So these are indirect weapons. They can fire up and over the walls of the fort, landing inside the fort itself. And they would have had exploding shells. So they would have, this is unusually, you can see things that blow up. And this is true of the 18th century. Those shells would have blown up. Those were the ones you had to get in nice and close because the indirect weapons have got quite a short range, but because they go high in the air and then down, causing havoc in the fort. It's only a matter of time before they surrender. They can't withstand that. This is the thing that people find so remarkable about the 18th century. You get this sort of highly formal process on the battlefield. Men who, minutes before or after, can be trying to bayonet each other, blast each other at close range. There's so much formality. There was one battle in the 18th century where both sides invited the other to fire first. He got the surrender scene. Indigenous allies, Native American allies with the French. The complicated politics between the French and their indigenous allies. With a great flourish, Montcalm, the Marquis de Montcalm, a nobleman. All the etiquette you'd expect of a French nobleman from the period. A gentle British head nod. The French always gave great flourishing bows, the British gave a simple nod.
Long ago, given the superior numbers and materials, chance has allowed me to array against you.
Monsieur le Marquis, I'm a soldier, not a diplomat. You call this parley for a better reason than an exchange of compliments.
You have already done everything which is necessary for the honor of your prince.
You can imagine the conversation going on like this. There was a sense in which you ought to hold the fort for as long as you could without needlessly spilling the blood of men for no purpose whatsoever. It seems strange to us now, but there was a certain etiquette to it. And once it was clear that he wasn't going to be relieved, British forces weren't going to come and save him, well, what's the point hanging out and dying to the last man? So what we call in Britain the 7 Years' War, in North America it's called the French-Indian War, took place in the 1750s, early 60s, and it is a giant confrontation between Britain and France for control of North America. There's fighting going on elsewhere in the world, but in North America it's really for control of the continent. The French had more Native American allies, so they fought alongside them as well, but on the whole it was the British and French going at it. They fought north of Albany towards Montreal, back and forward like the tide ebbing and flowing, and then they also launched a campaign to seize Quebec, the capital of French Canada, in 1759. That was a success. So in the end it's a British victory, but in the early years of the war there's a series of British setbacks as the French and their Native American allies fight far more effectively than the British. And the fall of Fort William Henry is a great example of that. It looks like the Louis Marquis de Montcalm, the French leader, could be about to sweep right into New England. Last Week is a wonderful film. Even if that ambush didn't quite go down like the way it is, I've got to give it a 9. Waterloo. This unbelievable scene. French cavalry riding across the fields like that. Marshal Ney in the lead, of course, the bravest of the brave, the Prince of Moscow. They get to the artillerymen run away. They'd have taken one wheel off the guns, in fact, so they couldn't be dragged off. Cavalrymen found these great masses of British squares, British and Allied squares, bayonets pointed outwards, troops able to fire their muskets, protected on all sides. There's quite a lot of squares there, probably slightly too many squares, but never mind. And you get a situation where the French cavalry kind of swirls around them, taking terrible casualties, but not able to break the squares, not able to rout the British and Allied troops. And Wellington would ride from one square to another, seeking sanctuary within them. Front rank kneeling, rank behind them, standing up. So you've got a great density of bayonets and muskets pointing out. I love this, Napoleon having a nightmare here.
Go forward with the cavalry without infantry support! What's the matter with you?
Now, something's going on in that picture because a few squares seem to be breaking up. None of the squares broke at the Battle of Waterloo. Yeah, there's Wellington in a square. He was at the Battle of Waterloo. He was always where the fighting was thickest. It was amazing he survived. French cuirassiers with their breastplates might look magnificent, but there's nothing they could do. They couldn't get into those squares. They couldn't get amongst the infantry. Oh, there you go. There's one of Wellington's aides-de-camp. His assistants killed, which happened to many of them that day. He lost fellow generals killed, wounded at his side. Many of his assistants killed and wounded. Long June days, that's the problem. Sunset's not till very late. There's a lot of daylight. A lot of fighting can take place in June. He's got the Prussians pushing in from the east. He's got Napoleon, him and Blucher, the Prussian general, got Napoleon in a vice-like grip. But if Napoleon can break the British and Allied army at Waterloo, at the top of the hill, then they can turn around potentially and deal with the Prussians. That's it, look at that. I love that scene. This bit is a bit weird. They were lying down in the crops and they jumped out and surprised the French troops, but I don't think there were 4 ranks like that. I think what they actually would stand in one line 4 deep to maximise their musketry at the French. And they delivered extraordinarily powerful volleys at very close range. Now the Imperial Guard have never surrendered before. They've never retreated, and here they are, met with British musketry, also Dutch, also Allied musketry, and they are finding it very difficult. Napoleon did have word spread through the army that he had a reinforcing unit that was coming. They weren't Prussians. People could see that they're actually reinforcing French troops. So he tried to use fake news to keep the morale up. There you go, there's Maitland's men, the British Guards, one of the best units of the British Army, the 1st Foot Guards, firing mass volleys into the French. They fixed bayonets and they actually charged. Marshal Ney, the bravest of the brave, there he is. He got 2 or 3 horses shot from under him during this charge. It was said of Marshal Ney that he sought death that day, but death didn't want him. It's astonishing how he survived that battle.
I've been in this position before at the Battle of Marengo. I lost the battle at 5 o'clock, but I won it back again at 7!
Come on, Ney. Even you aren't going to turn this one around, pal. He's fighting for his life because he knows that if he's ever recaptured by the French Bourbon kings, he's going to die in a ditch. He'd betrayed them once. They weren't going to let him do it again. And sure enough, he's killed by firing squad after this battle. Battle of Waterloo in June 1815, Napoleon's last roll of dice. He's come back from exile. He's seized France one more time. He wants to fight one last campaign to try and establish his grip on France. The Allies aren't going to let him. You've got Wellington and a British and Allied force in Belgium, supported by the Prussians, supported by an Austrian and Russian army marching in, supported by the Portuguese and Spanish. They are all circling France's borders. So Napoleon strikes first at Wellington in Belgium. He thinks Wellington might be the easiest to defeat, but he bit off a bit more than he can chew. And they fight this extraordinary battle, lasts all day, a terrible attritional struggle, tens of thousands of men killed and wounded. And in the end, Napoleon is catastrophically defeated, and it is the end of Napoleon Bonaparte on this battlefield. Waterloo, one of the most ambitious film projects ever undertaken, a gigantic depiction of that essential battle. I'm giving it an 8. Thanks for watching this video on the History Hit YouTube channel. You can subscribe right here to make sure you don't miss any of our great films that are coming out. Or if you are a true history fan, check out our special dedicated history channel, historyhit.tv. You're going to love it.